Officer Jack Rollins prided himself on reading situations before they unfolded. Years on the force had hardened him, teaching him to trust his instincts that often saw threats where none existed. His authority, his power, his badge, they were his weapons, but they were also his shield, protecting him from accountability. That night, as he patrolled the quiet suburban streets, his eyes locked onto a figure walking alone under the dim streetlights. A young black man, a hoodie over his head, hands in his pockets. To Rollins, it was a familiar scene, one that, in his mind, spelled danger. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. What's he doing out here? Who does he belong to? Is he up to no good? His mind answered before he could rationalize. He's a threat. Terrence Blake, 18 years old, was just walking home. His shift at the grocery store had ended late, and the night air felt refreshing after a long day. His headphones played his favorite songs, drowning out the world around him. He wasn't in a rush. He had walked this road 100 times before, but tonight, the world had different plans for him. As Rollins slowed his cruiser beside him, the flashing red and blue lights bathed the pavement in an ominous glow. "Hey, stop right there!" Terrence barely heard it over his music. He turned his head slightly, confused, then pulled out one earbud. "Sorry? What's wrong, officer?" "Hands where I can see them." Rollins's tone was sharp, commanding. Terrence frowned, his heartbeat picking up. "Is there a problem?" Rollins stepped out of the car, his hand resting on his holster. "Where are you coming from?" "My job," Terrence replied, keeping his voice calm. "I work at the grocery store down the road." Rollins wasn't listening. He had already made up his mind. "Got ID on you?" "Yeah, of course." Terrence reached into his jacket. Bad move. Rollins didn't see a wallet. He saw a weapon. "Hands up. Now." Terrence's breath caught in his throat. "I'm just getting my—" Too late. Rollins lunged. Before Terrence could react, he was shoved to the ground. His head hit the pavement hard. A flash of pain shot through him. His vision blurred. Then came the fists. 1, 2, 3. The sickening sound of bone against flesh echoed in the empty street. Blood pooled in Terrence's mouth. His cries of pain were swallowed by the night. "Stop resisting," Rollins snarled. Though Terrence wasn't fighting back, he couldn't. His ribs ached. His limbs felt heavy. Was this really happening? As darkness threatened to take him, he whispered through swollen lips, "My father is with the FBI." Silence. For the first time, Rollins hesitated, but the damage was done. He hauled Terrence up, shoved him into the back seat, and slammed the door shut. His pulse pounded in his ears. He told himself it didn't matter. The kid was lying. He had to be, but doubt gnawed at him. As they drove, the cruiser felt suffocatingly small. Rollins' grip on the steering wheel tightened. What if he wasn't lying? What if he had just made the biggest mistake of his career? Terrence sat slumped in the back seat, his head resting against the window. His face throbbed, his ribs ached, but his mind was clear. He knew what was coming. At the station, Rollins dragged him inside. The fluorescent lights exposed every bruise, every drop of blood, painting a picture of a crime not committed by Terrence, but against him. Officer Mitchell glanced up from the front desk, his brow furrowing. "What happened?" "Resisted arrest," Rollins muttered. Mitchell's eyes flicked to Terrence, then back to Rollins. There was doubt in his gaze, but he said nothing. Then, something changed. A night officer picked up a wallet from the evidence tray, the one that had fallen from Terrence's pocket during the scuffle. He casually flipped it open, glanced at the ID, and froze. "Rollins?" Something in his voice sent a chill down Rollins' spine. "You might want to take a look at this." Rollins approached, irritation simmering beneath his skin. "What is it?" The officer handed him the ID. One look, and his world came crashing down. Blake. Number. It couldn't be. Not that Blake. Not the agent Blake. Not the man who had walked through these halls countless times, assisting on high-profile cases. The man every cop in the department respected. The man who could destroy him with a single phone call. A sinking feeling settled in Rollins' gut. This wasn't just any kid. This was the son of one of the most powerful FBI agents in the state. The walls seemed to close in. His breathing grew shallow. His hands trembled. The arrogance that had fueled him minutes ago had vanished, replaced by something foreign, something suffocating. Fear. His mind raced. What would happen now? Would Agent Blake storm in, demanding justice? Would the department turn its back on him? For the first time in his career, Rollins realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. He swallowed hard. This wasn't just another rough arrest. This was a career-ending mistake. Rollins stands frozen under Blake's piercing glare. The air between them is thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down like an invisible force. Blake's voice is low but sharp, slicing through the silence. "Do you think you're a hero, Officer Rollins? Do you think you're making the streets safer? Look at what you've done. Look at my son." Rollins tries to speak, but his throat tightens. What could he possibly say? What excuse could justify what he had done? His gaze flickers toward the floor, unable to meet Blake's burning stare. Guilt churns in his stomach, his own breath suddenly feeling suffocating. Blake steps closer, his voice growing harsher, laced with pain and fury. "You didn't even bother to ask his name, did you? You saw a black kid walking down the street and assumed the worst. A threat. A criminal. I thought..." Rollins stammers. "No, you didn't think." Blake snaps, his voice cracking. "You reacted. And now my son is in a hospital bed because of your prejudice. Because you couldn't see past the color of his skin." Each word lands like a punch to the gut. Rollins had spent years convincing himself he was fair, that he upheld justice. But this moment, this truth, shatters every illusion. He let his bias dictate his actions, and an innocent young man suffered for it. Outside the station, the world is already watching. News spreads like wildfire. Reporters crowd the entrance, cameras flashing. Protesters gather, their voices rising with anger. Signs demanding justice fill the air. Justice for Terrence Blake and end racist policing. Inside, Rollins' superiors waste no time distancing themselves. The department, already under scrutiny, cannot afford another scandal. He is placed on immediate administrative leave. The words are spoken with cold efficiency, but Rollins barely hears them. His world is spinning. As he steps out of the building, his colleagues avoid his gaze. No words of support, no pats on the back. Just silence. The weight of disgrace clings to him like a heavy fog. That night, he sits alone in his apartment. The walls feel smaller, closing in. His hands tremble as he replays the day's events. The arrest, the brutal beating, Blake's raw, searing rage, Terrence's voice, weak but defiant. "My dad is FBI." A sickening realization grips him. He thought he was in control, enforcing the law, but the truth is, he had never been in control. His own biases had pulled the strings all along. His phone vibrates. Captain Marsh. The message is short and clear. "Be at the station first thing in the morning." He knows what's coming. The next morning, the precinct is a war zone. Officers walk on eggshells. Some whisper, others pretend not to see him. His badge, once a symbol of authority, now feels like a weight dragging him under. Captain Marsh's office is colder than usual. The space between them feels vast, heavy with unspoken words. Without preamble, Marsh slides a stack of papers across the desk. Witness statements, reports, media coverage. The headlines are brutal. Marsh exhales, rubbing his temples. "We're in a bad situation, Rollins. This department was barely holding on, and now the FBI is breathing down our necks. The media won't let this go, and we've got crowds outside demanding your resignation." Rollins nods. He has no defense. No excuses. Marsh leans forward, voice quieter now. You've been here a decade. You've earned commendations. But none of that changes what happened. This isn't just excessive force, this is racial discrimination, and there are consequences. Rollins swallows hard. He sees the next step unfolding before it's spoken. Marsh unseals another document, a suspension notice. You're done here for now, and frankly, I don't think this will blow over. The words land like a final nail in the coffin. Rollins stands, shaking Marsh's hand. It feels more like a goodbye than a temporary leave. Outside, the protests have doubled. Signs wave in the air, voices chant his name, demanding accountability. These were the people he swore to serve. Now they call for his downfall, and they're right. When he reaches home, the silence is deafening. His wife and kids are gone. A hastily written note on the kitchen counter says it all. I can't do this anymore. She took the kids, unable to handle the reporters swarming their doorstep. His phone rings. An old friend. He hesitates before answering, but the voice on the other end is distant, reluctant. Look, man, I can't be associated with this. I hope you understand. The call ends before he can respond. Days blur into weeks. The investigation drags on, but the court of public opinion has already reached its verdict. The media dissects every second of that night. Rollins watches from his darkened living room, the weight of his guilt pressing heavier with each headline. He had thought he was upholding justice. Now he sees the truth. He was never a hero, and he never will be.